Okay, so let's get started with how to use the printer bot. Everything that I'm going to talk about, everything that you need is going to be hosted right here on this Google site. You can see it right here, and there will be links sent out and links available on Blackboard so you can reach it. We're going to get started by going to the PrinterBot Simple Setup Guide. And most of the steps in this guide will have already been done for you. And in fact, will have most likely assembled your PrinterBot Simple, and it'll be all set up and ready to go. So we don't really need to worry about that. And what we want to get started with is the software that will actually control our printer. So we're going to go to the Getting Started with CuraUse software. And at this point, PrinterBot walks you through the simple steps with how to get the software loaded onto your computer. So we're going to go through this step one and download Cura version 15.04. So we can click this link, and this link will take us to a new web page. I've preloaded it for you called Ultimaker. This Ultimaker is a software designer. They also design their own printers, but their software called Cura will allow us to interface with our 3D printer. You'll need to select the version 15.04. That'll be this one right here for Windows, or for Mac, or if you're using Linux, they have a Linux version as well, which we can scroll to down at the very, very bottom. And any of these should work. If you're having trouble with getting the software downloaded and onto your computer, you should probably seek out some help from somebody that's experienced with this stuff. 3D printing is still not exactly plug and play, so you need to have some level of proficiency with computers in order to actually use these things. So let's assume that we've downloaded and installed our Cura software. Let's get started with how that actually works. So I'm going to open up my Finder, and this is on a Mac. Windows would be a little bit different. Again, you should know how to open software that you've installed on your particular computer if you're going to attempt to do some 3D printing. So we go to Applications, I go to Cura, and I'm going to double click and open up this software. It's going to take a couple seconds to open up, and what this software does is it tells the computer how to interact with the 3D printer. Now when the software is first set up, we set it up to interface with the particular printers that we have. There are a couple things that you'll want to do that you want to double check to make sure everything's going to work. And what do we have here that opens in our initial Cura screen? We have this basic tab and these other tabs up top. We won't need any of those. All we want to concentrate is on the basic one. You really shouldn't need to change any of these settings. These settings have all been tested for our particular printer, and they work quite well most of the time. The only things that you might need to change are going to be support types, and we'll talk about what that means in a second. So that's the left-hand side of our box. Now we need to talk about the right-hand side. The right-hand side is our software side that actually shows what's going on the printer itself. So this is a representation of a 3D box that represents the space I have to actually 3D print on. So this particular box is about 6 inches by 6 inches by 6 inches, which is the size of what's called the build plate on our printer. Let's say I want to print something. I can do that by loading a 3D CAD model file into this little box. So I could do that right up here with this load button. You notice these other two options are grayed out, and let's see what happens when we actually load a model up. I'm going to click to load. And up pops my downloads, and let's see, what do I want to load to print? I have a little file up here called Yoda, so let's load that up and see what that looks like. And this loads up, and you see this little window right there. That little bar was kind of loading up. That was actually taking this model file, and it was slicing it up into tiny, tiny layers so that the printer can actually print it. So it's making some code that will actually go to the printer and tell the printer what to do. That's what's in this final window over here, the start end G code. This is kind of telling the printer what it needs to do. We get an estimate of the time that it's going to take to actually complete this print. The software estimates it'll take the printer 6 hours and 31 minutes to print this file. And you notice that these two boxes are now not grayed out anymore. We can share our project on Umagine. Don't really need to worry about that option. What we want to worry about or think about is this print with USB. So this button will allow me to send this file to my printer and start my printer to actually run. But this thing's going to take 6 hours and 31 minutes. That's a lot of time. Let's say I don't want to take that much time to do my print. Maybe I want to shrink my print a little bit. That's where these buttons on the bottom come in. We can rotate our file, we can scale it, and we can mirror it. The most useful options I found have been scale, really, with most of the things that you're going to want to print, at least starting out. So scale will allow us to change how large this object is. Let's say I want a half-sized Yoda. I can scale it to be 0.5. We're going to get my loading bar, and that takes our print time down from 6 hours down to 1 hour. So it drastically decreases. I can decrease the size even more. I can make it a quarter of the size, and it would only take 16 minutes to print. Let's say I'm feeling adventurous and I want a double-sized Yoda. Now what we see happen here, the model file actually is turned gray. That's going to tell you that this file is too large to actually fit on your printer. And if you look around, you can see that parts of Yoda's ears are kind of sticking out of that blue box. So I've exceeded the maximum size for a print that I can do. So I don't want to do that. So let me send it back down to 0.25. So that's a nice small size print. It takes about 16 minutes, and I can be happy with that. Now when I look at the object that I'm printing, I usually want it to try to be flat and not have lots of spaces where there's empty space. And if I look here, you can see that the ears are just kind of floating in the air. There's nothing underneath them to support them. That could present a problem when I'm trying to print. This is where the support comes in. This option to include support will actually allow you to include support touching the build plate or support everywhere. And what this does is it kind of builds very thin little scaffolding plastic that will hold up these ears and give the ears something to sit on when you're printing. But then when your print is finished, the scaffolding is small enough, it's thin enough that you can just kind of snap it right off and have a nice Yoda print. So what I can do now, I can test one thing and then I'll be ready to print. You want to make sure that you go up to File in the CuraUse software menu and go to Preferences. And the one preference we want to change the printing window type. We want to change that from basic to printer face. And we can click OK. And by doing that, that's going to give us a little bit more control over how the printer works. So I can click to print with USB, and that pops up my window. This is my printer face window. And what I want to do is automatically connect. So your software should automatically start connecting. If it doesn't, you can click this connect button. This connect button would be in black if the software would not actually connect to your printer. And now we can start actually controlling the printer.